go ahead and get started, everybody. So this is kind of a redo of the presentation that we did at Power Test back in February, I guess spilling over a little bit into March. Obviously, not everybody was able to make it to Power Test. Not all companies are represented necessarily, but also perhaps some of you guys weren't able to make the trip as well. So we're doing this webinar to kind of give a current state of the exam program, the certification program, as well as some new information, study material, those types of things for the certification exam, in hopes that it will it'll improve everybody's experience getting their competent people qualified and certified. And so that's what this is about. Like Kristen said, interrupt me if we're on a specific slide and you got a question about a specific item, and just hold all the applause until the very end, if you would. And then, so we'll go ahead and get started.
Oh, sorry. Let's see. Here we go.
So we'll talk a little bit about kind of what we've gone through over the past, it's been about 2 years now. With the exam development, the new exam design that I'm sure most people are familiar with either personally or through the company. We'll talk about what's new. What's really kind of the point where I got some time at the membership meeting to talk about was performance that we've seen so far, both good and bad, and some things to help you prepare, all in an attempt to help the NETA accredited companies be successful in their certification journey for all their Go ahead, Kristen.
Oh, nope, that's not me. You're good.
Oh no, next slide.
Oh, sorry. I'm trying to take roll. Thanks, Dan.
Yeah. So exam development is a continuous process for sure, and we've done all of this process once, and we will continue to do this basically indefinitely. One of the key things that we learned upon embarking on this project was we administered our own exams or developed our own exams kind of in-house for years, and we ended up with situations that I'm sure a lot of people can relate to, with a little bit stale exam content, wasn't getting rotated out. We were talking about oil dash pots still, and maybe not talking at all about microprocessor-based relays and those types of things. So we recognize that that this process, this circle that you see here, is continuous. So we started off with a job analysis. This was done in a couple of different methods. Probably the most important one was a survey of all the NETA accredited companies. If my numbers are right, we had 64 NETA accredited companies and well over 200 technicians respond to the survey that we sent out, basically giving input into what they do day in and day out, what's important to be a competent technician at all three levels, level 2, level 3, and level 4. We took the results of that job analysis and we made an exam design. The exam design is open, free content on the website, and we'll show it to you. It's called a detailed content outline, basically, and we'll show you that later on. And then we go into item writing, which has been a ton of the work. Item writing, item is just a new word, or a word that the industry uses for questions. We've done a ton of item writing. I'll show you some statistics on that. And then you have to combine all those items onto what we call a form, which is just one test as a candidate would see it. And there's some work that has to go into that, because you may have items that clue each other, or that build on each other in a way that is good, or that build on each other in a way that is bad. So this form setting is actually looking at holistically at the exam with all the items that have been selected from the exam bank and make sure that they fit correctly into one form. And then we deliver the exams, obviously computer-based testing, which we've been doing for years, although we've changed the provider, so some of the typical sites might have changed a little bit, but it's still computer-based exam, and that's how we deliver. And then we do a standard setting, which basically is a face-to-face meeting, and we decide what the passing score is. And the passing score is 410 out of 500, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. So we've done that once, and although the job analysis doesn't get repeated for another 5 to 7 years, we continue to item write, we continue to form set. Obviously, we continue to deliver exams and kind of continually keep our exam bank and our certification program relevant and up to date. Go ahead, Kristen.
Nope. Okay.
So this is kind of the hierarchy, so to speak. Obviously, all the exam committee members report in this structure, so to speak. We've got the board of directors up at the top with the fiscal and outcome oversight. You've got the exam committee actually falls under the Standards Review Council. Standards Review Council is responsible for everything technical, so to speak, on that happens at NETA. And then we have the exam committee, which I'm the chair, and we have 4, 5, 6 other members of the exam committee, something like that.
6 total.
And Kristen is our staff liaison for the exam committee. And then we have subject matter experts, some of them that have done face-to-face, some of them that have done remotely. We actually just added a pretty big pool of subject matter experts at an item writing session that we did at Power Test. And I'll be able to show you kind of some summary numbers. And remember the exam scope and blueprint, starting out with NETA accredited companies and individual technicians, that survey, that input was at the very beginning. So that's kind of the list of hierarchy of our contributors to this program. Next slide, Kristen. So we do have only one certification program. It's the NETA Electrical Testing Technician or Electrical Test Technician certification program. And we do have 3 levels, level 2, level 3, and level 4. To date, we've involved 39 subject matter experts. 64 NETA accredited companies had input into the design, which is a pretty good number because we offered it and invited all of the NACs, and we got 64 out of probably 80 or 85 at the time that we did that. So pretty good percentage there, very good percentage actually. We've had 228 face-to-face hours in the exam committee with the whole of the exam committee and then subject matter experts also along the way. We've administered 697 exams. Our exam bank approved right now is about 1,176 with more actually now because we've developed some, like I said, a Power Test, and well over 3,000 man hours, basically volunteer man hours that have gone into this project. So very, very large effort by a large proportion of our NACs and our technicians and whatnot. Probably more participation in this committee and this effort as a single project than anything else that NETA's ever done. So that's great. Next slide.
Sorry, hang on. It keeps telling me there are, I think, more people trying to log in, but we're at our maximum capacity. So.
Yeah, well, that's good.
Yes.
So what's new since Power Test 2016? So over the last year, so to speak, we do have this new exam design that we talked about. We've got our new test forms, and we've got 100% new items. All of the items have been, excuse me, generated uniquely We didn't have any carryover from the previous exam bank, so to speak. Obviously, the subject matter can be pretty similar, or questions can be pretty similar, but we have rewritten them. The subject matter experts in the exam committee have learned a lot from our consultant on how to write questions that are not confusing. They're not trick questions. They're not negatively stated, like which of these are not, unless absolutely necessary. And we've also used to be a 5 item or 5 response multiple choice, and now it is a 4 response multiple choice. We have a revised study guide that's available on the website under the certification tab, and that's one of the things that we're continuing to work on. I guess some of the things that we've taken care of that we're going to present to you here. This is kind of the next big one on the list, is to really bolster that study guide. So it's changed already. It's been updated already, but you'll see it continue to change, but it'll always be available on the website. We've given access to the formula sheet outside of the exam. Obviously, the formula sheet and familiarity with it is important. And after internal discussions and talking with our consultant, publishing that, so to speak, making it public so people know what they have before they walk into exam is not an issue. And so we've given access to that also under the certification tab on the website. And we've also provided the scientific calculator, a link to it on the website, again, so that practice is available using that scientific calculator prior to game day, so to speak, so that that's not a barrier to doing well on the exam, doing exactly what the competency level of your technicians would do. So they can practice with that. And then we've got some new prep tools that we first presented at Power Test 2017, and that's what we're going to review next. Does anybody have any questions so far? Okay. So a lot of these, nearly all of the efforts that the exam committees put in this calendar year came out of a roundtable discussion and brainstorming type session at the January meeting, where we asked the people in attendance to talk about what they do to try to prepare their technicians, and ask them what NETA could do to help prepare their technicians better to sit for the exam. And we got some feedback from that, and that's where a lot of our efforts have been focused. So if you have additional suggestions on that, then we're going to take those at the end. But basically, performance reports, sharing resources, a study guide, and the DCOs. DCO stands for Detailed Content Outline, and we're going to discuss that kind of in depth actually here. Reference materials, we've talked a little bit about that. We've updated those in the study guide a little bit, but we're going to have a more comprehensive update to the reference materials coming very shortly. We talked about the calculator and formula sheet, that idea, so to speak, of having those available prior to the exam came out of this brainstorming session. We didn't find any issue with it, and so we did that, hoping that it would have the desired intent. Obviously, the ANSI NETA standards, this is a NETA test technician certification program, so knowledge of all 4 of our ANSI accredited standards are important. And then there's a frequently asked questions sheet, because we do have a little bit different scoring system than what we've had in the past. There's very good reasons why we have the scoring system that we do. And so there's a frequently asked questions sheet that Kristen put together, and it's available on the website, so you can kind of understand how to interpret score sheets, and we'll talk a little bit about that later too. So study sessions, this is kind of what other NACs do. Study sessions, mentorships, obviously power tests, and then member meetings. We talk we talk a lot about a lot of good things at the member meetings. Just over the last year or so, we've talked a lot about the exam because it's kind of at the forefront of what people are asking questions about. Next slide. So here's our new stuff. The detailed content outlines, we're going to review that. We're going to give a little bit more insight into how to use those and what the different sections or what the different information on the detailed content outlines tell you about what to expect on the exam. We're going to talk about average performance by level. So we're going to give you some feedback into how well level 2s, level 3s, and level 4s are doing in certain areas. And this is backed up by the whole comprehensive report. We're going to summarize it today, but there's a comprehensive report that was given out at Power Test. I believe it was emailed out when we invited you to this webinar. But if you don't have a copy of that, it is available. Kristen can send you that. We're going to talk about the subdomain performance lists, which is kind of what I was just talking about actually, how the subdomains perform. And then the reference list. Again, a very comprehensive reference list, and that's still a work in progress, although we're on the home stretch there and getting that out. One of the benefits of the company that we're working with on this exam project is references are extremely important and must be attached to every item. So we have a very good list of where the actual black and white requirements that we're asking on the exam are listed. Next slide. So this is the detailed content outline. There's one for each level. These are available on the website as well under the certification tab. And this basically gives you the exam design parameters. There's 5 levels to this document. Level 1 shows there as telling you what level certification exam it applies to. In this case, it's level 2. The domain. So all 3 levels of the exam are split into 4 domains. And we're going to show you this is just kind of a snapshot to talk about it, but we'll show you the actual detailed content outline here in just a moment. So each detailed content outline has 4 domains. Item 3 there circled, it tells you exactly how much by the exam design each of those domains is as a percentage of the total exam. So in this case, level 2, the 3rd domain, which is titled component testing, that makes up 55%, if I can read that fuzzy number, I think it's 55% of the overall exam. This is kind of important information when you're studying for yourself or you're trying to get technicians ready. This information of percentages tells you where focus should start. It's not where focus should end, obviously, but it can prioritize, you know, what percentage of the exam is going to be in the certain domain. That's exactly what it does. It does change a little bit as you go from level 2 to 3 to 4. Obviously, a level 4 would probably need to know more about systems and commissioning than a level 2, and we'll see that. So that percent of exam in block 3 there can be pretty important. And then block 4 there is the subdomain. So the domain in this case being component testing, this subdomain as an example is transformers. There's in domain 3 there's 26 subdomains, and the 26 subdomains happen to correspond to the 26 sections of the testing specs, transformers, cables, switchgear, et cetera, et cetera. So that is a subdomain. It gets pretty specific to the type of equipment, basically. And then under the subdomain, you have a specific KSA. Under transformers, there happens to be 5. KSA stands for knowledge, skill, or ability. And it actually lists out the knowledge, skill, and ability that is applicable to transformers in this example, that you got to write a question or answer a question. I say write a question because I've written a lot of questions. This is exactly how a subject matter expert is given an assignment to help the committee. You know, can you please write a question on domain 3B4? And if 3B4 says employ methods and procedures for electrical tests of transformers, well, that's what that subject matter expert is going to kind of get in their mind to be able to write a question. So they're going to talk only about electrical testing, and they're going to find some information either in the C57 standard or in the ANSI NETA spec or something like that, and try to formulate a question based that tests that knowledge, skill, and ability. So, Kristen, can we look at the actual detailed content outline now? And it should get a little bit clearer to read, so you can blow it up a little bit. So again, this is available on the website. Level 2, Level 3, and Level 4 are all part of the same document. That's kind of the review that we just went over, the preface to the DCO. So this is Level 2, Domain 1, which is safety. Domain 2, electrical testing and fundamentals. Domain 3, remember, is the component testing. And then Domain 4 is systems and commissioning. So let's run back up to Domain 1 on this Level 2. If you read to the right there, you can see that safety is 15% of the exam. And you can see it gets pretty specific, talks about risk assessment, electrically safe work conditions, lockout, tagout, et cetera, everything to deal with safety. Domain 2, more fundamentals, so we're going to talk about doing voltage drop calculations and power triangle type of calculations, those types of things. And then one of the other things, if you can go to Domain 3, Kristen, that are on the new detailed content outline, it should be helpful, is you see we're at the beginning of Domain 3 here. The subdomain switchgear and switchboard assemblies has an asterisk right by the A there. That asterisk is another piece of information that can be useful to you. The asterisks denote that subdomain will be present on every exam. So just on the screen that you can see right now, you can see that switchgear and switchboard assemblies, transformers, cables will be represented on every Level 2 certification exam. Metal enclosed busways, on the other hand, may or may not. So of the 26 subdomains in Domain 3, component testing, there are 13 for Level 2 that have to be represented on every exam. This is based on input from the exam committee, the subject matter experts, and then from the technicians that actually responded to the survey and said, this is the stuff that is most important, this is the stuff that I do most often, those types of things. So between the overall score, the overall percentage of the score, 55% of the items coming from Domain 3 for a Level 2 technician, you can see that the asterisk items are going to be represented, about half, everything's going to be in those asterisk items. The remainder of the exam, so there's basically two specs that every exam has to fall into. They have to have the percentages correct by domain. In this case, 55% of this exam has to be in component testing. And the other spec, so to speak, that it has to meet is all of the asterisk subdomains have to be represented on that exam. Beyond that, the rest of the exam is filled out with a random sampling of the rest of the domain and put together into a form, and then that form is approved. So that should be, perhaps, I hope, a little bit more information than you've had in the past, and maybe help you to kind of navigate this detailed content outline and kind of know where to prioritize studying, where to start. Obviously, you got to emphasize that everything on the detailed content outline is free game for an exam, but knowing what the % of overall score number is, and knowing the areas that are certain to be presented to a test candidate, I think gives a little bit of good information, a little bit of insight into how to prepare more effectively for the exam. Any questions on the detailed content outlines? Okay, great. Let's go back to the presentation, Kristen. We'll go on to the next slide. So you get a score letter. You either get a score letter that says, sorry, you did not pass, and here's your relative performance by content area or domain, or you get a score that said, congratulations, you did pass, and with really no information. Obviously, if you pass, you're competent. If you don't pass, you're not competent. And if you're not competent, this gives you a relative study guide, so to speak. We do have a scaled score system. 200 to 500 is the scale, with 410 being the passing score. Again, we have those frequently asked questions if you want to understand more about the scaled score and how it works. But the reason why I presented this in the presentation is taking a look at the relative performance by content area. This particular candidate did pretty well in safety. Theory and fundamentals and component testing were equally bad, so to speak. And systems and commissioning, optimistically, was only about half of the performance needed to get a high score there. But the other reason why I put this in the PowerPoint is to kind of lead us into this next section here. Next slide, Kristen. This is how all of the level 2s performed in over the last year. The light blue, obviously, is an average of all of the passing candidates. The dark blue is an average of all the failed, the candidates that failed. So the insight that can be gleaned from this, in my mind, is safety. For example, obviously there's a discrepancy. The people that failed aren't going to do as good as the people that passed. But when you get down to fundamentals and theory, there's a lot larger discrepancy there. So hopefully some insight into how a typical or an average level 2 is performing. If you're a passing level 2, you're doing pretty well on fundamentals, theory, calculations, those types of things. If you're not a passing candidate, that's where you tend to be weakest. And then component testing, again, pretty large discrepancy. Systems and commissioning, a little bit smaller, but still a pretty big discrepancy. But so if I had a level 2 that had failed once or twice, I feel I could use this this graph, so to speak, of kind of focusing a candidate to say, yeah, you need improvement on all areas, but what you really need help on is component testing and theories and fundamentals. If you were to do as well in theories and fundamentals and component testing as the average passing candidate, then that's where you're going to make your largest gains. So that's how level 2, on average, again, this is not an individual person, and this is also not, this is a look in the past. This doesn't tell us anything of really what to expect in the future. This is just a snapshot of the data that we have so far. But this is how our technicians that were sitting for the level 2 certification exam performed. So let's take a look at level 3.
Hey, Dan, we have a question. I think it goes back to the detailed content outlines. I missed it when it popped up. I don't know if you want to answer it now or just keep going with this and then come back to it.
No, let's go ahead and go back.
Okay, so the question is, are the unique electrical components of the utility scale renewables industry, aka solar power and or solar photovoltaic, represented by NETA? Question mark.
So if you look at the detailed content outline, those specific components, so to speak, if they were going to be on the exam, they would be represented in domain 3. Right now, those domain, the section, or domain 3 is only represents the equipment that's in the NETA specs. So you're not going to see a section on solar panels. You certainly will see a section on conductors, low voltage, medium voltage, high voltage. You're certainly going to see switches. You're going to see a UPS. You're going to see a DC system that might be tied to a solar farm. So the components that make up, say, a new wind installation, they're going to be well represented, but it's probably not going to be labeled wind turbine, or it's not labeled wind turbine or wind farm type application. So, but for the wind farm example, you have rotating machinery. They're represented by NETA. You have either transformers that are up in the tower, or you have pad mount transformers at the bottom that are certainly represented in NETA. You've got circuit breakers. You've got a certain amount of controls, isolation switches, obviously the safety that kind of goes along with any piece of electrical equipment, whether it's in a hospital or whether it's in a steel mill. So no, you won't see a wind farm or a solar section in NETA at this time, although that might be something that comes up down the road. But right now it's not covered in NETA as its own section, but the components that make up an electrical system, no matter where it happens to be installed, are well represented. I'm not certain who had that question, but does that come anywhere close to answering what you were asking?
He says yes. Thank you.
Perfect.
Okay. Thanks, Dan.
Yeah. So let's go down to level 3. So level 3, again, obviously the average failed candidate didn't do as well in all the areas as the average passing candidate, but systems and commissioning, you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, almost 5 graduations of our little scale there. There's a pretty big discrepancy in a passing level 3 technician and a failing level 3 technician. Level 3 is a big step, as you guys know, in knowledge level and experience and competence, and that's where we really start talking about systems and how things interact, and actually commissioning a whole system instead of just doing, the test required on a medium voltage cable or something like that. So systems and commissioning would be the biggest discrepancy, although you can see a fairly large discrepancy in just about all of them. Safety probably being the closest one, just about 2 graduations difference between that. So if I had a level 3, I would want to make sure that they understand and have bridged the gap from a component tester to a systems and commissioning type of guy that a level 3 should have, and also the fundamentals and theory. Again, this kind of shows that the level 3 candidates that failed were deficient in all areas, safety being the least deficient. And then for level 4, we see the biggest discrepancy in component testing. Safety is a couple graduations. Fundamentals and theory is kind of the smallest that we've seen it through all the other levels. So the candidates that are for level 4 are much closer to an overall average passing level for calculations, power triangles, resistance testing as a theory, current testing as a theory, those types of things. Component testing looks like it has the biggest discrepancy. And so what we're hoping is year by year we can kind of see where our largest discrepancies are, and then be able to report back where gains hopefully have been made, and where the level of knowledge of our failed candidates is getting closer and closer to the passing candidates, as kind of a study tool for the NACs, the technicians, and anybody within an NAC that they're kind of responsible for preparing technicians to sit. Okay, next slide. And then the next thing, I think this is the last thing, that we introduced at Power Test was the subdomain performance analysis. And this was made possible, number one, by Kristen's hard work, but number two, kind of by the strict method by which we've designed this new exam. We have a lot of data that we can share without compromising the exam to really help the NACs to understand more specifically, even more specifically than that relative graph, those relative graphs that we were just looking at. This is how our candidates did on average on all the subdomains. So this is expected to be used as obviously a supplement to the ETT, which tells you the qualifications to be able to sit for exams, an experience level, and that type of stuff. Excuse me. And the detailed content outlines. The detailed content outlines is the exam design, and it won't change for another 4 or 5 years, something like that. This subdomain performance analysis is really just a snapshot of how we've done so far for the last year. So, so that's what we're going to look at next, where we separated it by exam level, and it was mailed out to all the accredited representatives. And you can probably get a copy from Kristen if you ask nicely, if you don't already have it. So what we did was take a list of level 2 questions, or not the actual questions, well, kind of. We took a list of all of the items that had been presented on an exam for the last year, and we sorted them by the performance, how well candidates did on average on these domains, but more important subdomains. So obviously we've got a lot of domain 3 here, component testing, and then the subdomain tells you what piece of equipment we're actually talking about. So level 2s performed the worst on circuit switchers. Which wasn't a big surprise to me, to be honest with you. It's a piece of equipment that maybe some companies don't deal with a lot, utility level type stuff. So that one was not a big surprise to me, although it's covered in the NETA specs. And if you put a level 2 that maybe never seen one in front of one, it would take them probably about 10 minutes to figure out that it's kind of the same testing, and they're probably could learn a little bit about it and be competent at that as well. But it's something new for sure. I can't say that on my level 2, 3, or 4 exam I remember having any questions about circuit switchers. But they're covered in the spec. They're covered in the detailed content outline. What was the next 4 were large surprises to me. Switches, motor control centers, and ground fault protection systems. Those were our least proficient subdomains for our level 2 candidates for the last year. That kind of shocks me. This again, I look at this, and if I was in the situation of trying to get people ready for an exam, I can look at this list and say, you know, a typical level 2 needs to learn something about circuit switchers. This, and Kristen just put up a reproduction of the list just so we can talk about kind of the highs and the lows. You can look at the big list if you want to. But this is what I would use to say, you know, if you're going to go to a level 2, you need to you need to learn what the spec says about thermographic survey. You need to know how to test a ground fault protection system inside and out, motor control center, switches, those types of things. And then on the flip side of that, next slide, these are the subdomains that performed the best for level 2. So the absolute best would be at the bottom of this list, lockout tagout procedures. That actually makes me feel pretty good. I like that. You know, PPE, resistance testing, switchgear and switchgear assemblies, those types of things. So you may be able to use this to say, hey, you know, a typical level 2 lockout tagout, they probably got a lot of training on that and they're performing very well. Confined space, there's really only about 5 lines of confined space regulation in OSHA, and so it doesn't take long to study for that, and then you know the right answer. PPE, something that they deal with a lot. Resistance testing, that theory seems to be solid in our level 2s, et cetera, et cetera. So this is kind of the top of the list, so to speak, for level 2. So let's take a look at level 3, Kristen. So again, this is the worst. Oh no. Answered. Oh yeah. So the worst performing subdomain for level 3 is fiber optic cables. Network protectors, that one's not a big surprise. DC systems, that's a surprise to me. Ground fault protection systems, that's a really big surprise to me. PPE, lockout, tagout, grounding, metering. So I highlighted these red ones that they were kind of surprises to me. So if I had a typical level 3 coming to me and saying they're ready to take the exam, I might use this tool as to say, well, you know, you might not deal a lot in network protectors, but there's probably only going to be a question or 2 on those. Make sure you know ground faults and PPE and lockout, tagout, et cetera, et cetera. And then on the high end of performance for level 3, they performed best on incident energy analysis, switches, switchgear and switchboard assemblies, insulation testing, circuit breakers, and ironically, circuit switchers was the 6th best subdomain for level 3s. So, so that's good. That makes me feel pretty good that level 3 kind of knows the ins and outs of an incident energy analysis. But again, taking this whole list, I hope that it kind of gives a little bit of a picture and can be an assistant to give assistance to an individual technician that wants to test, or somebody that's kind of got a pool of technicians and their responsibility is to kind of prepare them. And then real quick, we'll go through level 4. Excuse me. Worst would be surge arresters. The ones that surprise me would be temporary protective grounding, codes and standards, confined space, metering devices. And then the most proficient of our level 4 candidates over the last year, liquids and gases, fiber optic cables, switchgear, insulation testing, risk management, and kind of a surprise, reclosers and line sectionalizers. That was the highest subdomain of all of the level 4 candidates that's taken the test over the last year. So again, that comprehensive list is available to you if it helps. I hope it does because we spent some time on it and just trying to give some insight. And then the last thing that's not quite available yet, although I've mentioned before, this is kind of the top of our list, this is what we're working on right now, is a reference list that's kind of arranged by subdomain. We've had some questions like, you know, fiber optics or network protectors, or maybe perhaps one of the more obscure parts of the NETA spec where we ask questions about it now because it's part of the NETA spec. And they say, people will call and ask, you know, where do I study for this? So we're putting together this comprehensive reference list, and it will be arranged by subdomain. So you can see kind of an example of what it might look like. It'll be cleaner than this. That's kind of what we're working on right now, is trying to clean it up and make it usable. But if you want to direct a level 2 or 3 or 4 to study material for switches, for example, domain 3E. Obviously, you've got the ANSI NETA specs. You've got the Paul Gill book that talks about maintenance and testing. You've got the ATS. So you've got the ATS and the MTS, obviously. 70B, NFPA 70B actually has a fair amount of information that can be had on that particular topic. And that's what we're going to do for basically the entire exam design. So you can kind of look at a detailed content outline, look at how much of the exam is going to be dispersed out through all the domains, look at the subdomains that actually will be represented on every exam, and then you'll be able to take a look at this reference list and say, okay, I need to study fiber optic cables, and this is the reference that I need to dig into to make sure that I understand the testing, the what's the word I'm looking for? The types, applications, the electrical testing, the visual mechanical inspections, and the test results that I should expect for fiber optic cables. So those two things should be able to be brought together and be a pretty good tool, pretty useful tool. It is not 100% comprehensive. There are some things that it's really tough to make a reference for, like how to do a calculation, unless you want our reference to say Pythagorean's theorem or something like that. There's also some troubleshooting questions that are a little bit tough to get a specific dot standard type reference to, but this is an 85 or 90% solution, I believe. So that's all I got to say about that. Next slide, Kristen.
Dan, we had a question about when this list will be available.
For that, I defer to the young lady. No. No, we've been working on this actually for about 2 weeks before power test and ever since, to be honest with you. What we're trying to avoid, and the reason why this, although it's a kind of a simple thing to say to get all these references out, what we don't want is to give too little or too much information. We don't think it would be useful for you to, for us, to provide a reference list that says, make sure that you know the IEEE C37 standard, because that's, taller than I am. And it's not real useful when you send a level 2 or a 3 or a 4 off and say, yeah, just make sure you know C37. Or another example would be, yeah, just make sure you know the National Electric Code. That's 1,000 pages worth of stuff, and there's probably only 30 articles that really are the meat and apply to what a test technician might encounter in the field. So we don't want to give too little information and be too vague and just say C37, National Electric Code, and read all 900 pages of the Gill book too, and then you'll be good. We also don't want to go to the other extreme and say, you need to go to section 7.2.2, line 4, and what is that number? Because then you basically just have a list of references that tell you what the answers to questions are. And that is not a good indicator of whether somebody is competent or not. And of course, that's the whole point of this certification exam. Are you competent or are you not? So we're trying to find that middle ground, and it changes a little bit based on the reference that we're talking about. If we're talking about the 4 ANSI NETA specifications, it's pretty widely accepted that if you're a level 4 NETA tech, you need to know the ANSI NETA specifications, all of them, including the ECS, even though it's new. It's not a very big book. So we're trying to find that middle ground, and we're putting together, we've already started on this, and now we basically have to apply it to our big list of references. We're putting together kind of guidelines. If we're talking about an IEEE spec, we need to give perhaps a section number. We need to give, in the National Electric Code, we just need to at least give the general article number. So you're not flipping through 100 pages, but you're also not just going to the specific paragraph. You're actually going to read a few paragraphs or a couple pages and kind of internalize what impact a National Electric Code article has on the testing industry and has on a test technician in the field, and what kind of information in that article would help a technician to become or to be more competent or not. So that's the gap we're trying to shoot, and I hope that that kind of explains why it's not just as easy as exporting a CSV file and putting it into Excel and sending you, a 1,000-line thing and calling it a reference list. We want it to be usable. We don't want it to be too specific. We also don't want it to be too general. And so that's what we're working through right now. Does that help?
I don't want to speak for the person who asked the question, but I think that was a good explanation of what we've discussed, Dan.
Okay, great. So let's go to the next slide. I think we've just kind of as a review, focus on pass-fail. If you fail, you get kind of that score letter. You can see your relative performance to see where you need to improve. If you pass, you are competent and you move on at that level, and the score by which you pass honestly doesn't matter. At that last bullet point, this does not, an exam, any written exam, especially ours for a field technician, it does not tell you how competent somebody is. It's a minimum. It is a cut score. It is a yes/no answer. Although a lot of us in the field love data instead of just pass/fail, really exams are pass/fail. You either are competent or you are not. So that's what should be focused on, and that's kind of outlined in that frequently asked questions document that Kristen has under the certification tab. Next slide. So I've talked for a long time. We'd like some feedback, even if it's bad, about the tools that we presented today. Anything unique that maybe we didn't talk about or that you guys think is working really well in your companies to prepare NETA technicians for the different levels of competency. And then what's real important to me and Kristen, because we pretty much work for you guys, is what else can the NETA office do and the exam committee do to give you more help for your company and technicians to succeed in the certification program?
Hey Dan, it's Kristen. We did have a question a while back that the person asked to hold it to the end. So I guess we're to that point now. So I can start with that one and then see what other questions there might be.
Okay, that sounds good.
So I'm just going to read the text here. It says, is there an identified correlation between the industry experience level, i.e. master electrician, master generator technician, 4-year degree in electrical, electronics, I think that's an et cetera. Are these qualities identified in test passage at all levels? Do they form the basis for prerequisite is the question.
I've got some answers. There are some specific education and training levels that count towards experience as outlined in the ETT. I believe that it says that you can use, for every 2 years of formal education, it can equal 1 year of experience in the field, but there's a limit to that. Kristen, back me up on this because you can hear me struggling.
Yeah, so that's a often misinterpreted line in the ETT that's not a very large, prominent line, but it's on page 16 under the matrix that talks about prerequisites and minimum qualifications by level. And there's a line underneath that table that has an asterisk that goes to the education requirements. And any formalized education that's not field-related experience. So we really are looking for people to be field experience technicians rather than classroom experienced technicians, because a lot of this test has always been designed based on field experience, because that's the unique niche that that NETA really occupies. So with that being said, the Standards Review Council was the original drafter of that document, the ANSI NETA ETT, and they determined a long time ago that it seemed appropriate to allow for formalized education to count towards this experience requirement, but they wanted to make sure that it never superseded that field-related experience, and so they capped it at 1 year. So even if you have a PhD in, you know, physics or something, it's only going to count towards as 1 year towards your prerequisite requirements. So, so that's kind of the long answer to that question. And the way, Dan, you stated it is really the way that most people interpret it, where it kind of is a 2-to-1 ratio, but which is true, but it's capped at 1 year of related experience. So that, hopefully that has answered that question, which I know is kind of the answer to the question that was asked. There's probably some more parts to that that I'm not qualified to answer, but.
Yeah, so that was the education piece. That was a little bit easier because we at least have some black and white on that. The other part is, you know, translation of, you know, a journeyman electrician, a master electrician, you know, a renewable energy technician. That there's a certification program in the wind industry for that. I know of no direct, you know, memorandums of understanding or anything like that. But what Kristen said is really the most important part. We're talking about field experience, testing, troubleshooting, maintenance, repair, those types of things of electrical equipment. That's where it really kind of has to be evaluated. So I've had journeyman electricians that come to me that went through a 4-year apprenticeship and they were good at splicing, and so they started splicing right after they were journeyman, got their journeyman's license, and that's all they've done for a 30-year career. And it was very difficult to kind of get them out of the cable environment that they'd lived in for their entire lives and kind of understood all the aspects of what happens in a NETA accredited company. On the flip side, I've had people that have not attained journeyman status yet, but they were in a service arm of an electrical contractor, and they understood a lot of testing. They did a lot of testing and troubleshooting and service calls and all those other things, and so it was much easier for them to kind of acclimate to what life is like in an NAC and what equipment you see and what kind of scopes of work there are and those types of things. So it's a difficult question to answer, because I don't think that a journeyman electrician here and a journeyman electrician here, they may have similar qualifications as it applies to being a construction electrician, but they could be extremely different in kind of their level of knowledge and ability to function as a test technician. So I hope that helps. So anything else?
I don't see any more questions on the chat function.
Okay. Well, we've taken our hour. I'm more than willing to stick around if somebody has other questions.
We have one more here. Let's see. Let's see. Oh, it looks like it looks like I have a couple more. Sorry. Okay. Somebody's asking, I believe, for a pass percent. Can you tell us what percentage of ETTs have passed the levels 2, 3, and 4? And then that next, yep, okay, sorry. So yeah, I have 2 other questions after that, so go ahead.
Good. And I understand if some people need to drop off. Remember, all this is being recorded, so you can refer back to it if you've got something else you got to go do. I appreciate everybody's time. It was very good turnout. So yeah, pass rates. Pass rates are not publishable, so to speak. It goes into the defensibility, the integrity of the exam, both from the exam committee level and then also our consultant that we that we work with. But in the interest of data and which I know and love very well, I can tell you kind of what my train of thought is when talking about pass rates. So many of you probably know that it was about 2 years ago that we decided we were going to embark on this large exam project, revamp the exam. It needed to be revamped just from a time period standpoint. The exam had been out there a long time. It also needed to be revamped because we saw statistics that were basically that were unacceptable. We saw that the amount of time that a test technician took to complete the exam went down by over half. So, for instance, an exam that you're given 2.5 hours, 4 people were getting it done in like 20 minutes, 30 minutes. So we saw the time to take an exam decrease by more than half, and then at the same time, we saw the pass rates double. So infer what you want for that. I know what I'm pretty sure I know what was happening. So people were able to take the test very, very quickly and pass it almost as quickly as you could literally read a question, which doesn't sound like a very defensible and an exam with much integrity. So so we have that in the recent past. Prior to that, because the exam committee did write new questions and they put out new forms and they did all that, but prior to where we saw that big shift in performance levels, we have historic performance levels that go back longer than since I've been involved in NETA, but we know those historic pass rates, and those historic pass rates are obviously based on the new technicians trying to attain the next level. It's the pool of people. It's statistically, honestly, it's the same kind of pool of people. It's the same type of people that start new companies or move companies and have to retest or whatever it is. And so we saw these. So we have the historical, and then we saw the most recent really go up to an unacceptable level for pass rates. What I can say about over the past year of what has happened to pass rates, right after the new exam came out, the pass rates dropped. I think that everybody knows that. There's no disputing that. It was new content. It was more comprehensive content, and to be quite honest with you, the candidates showed up thinking that they were going to know a lot of the answers, if not all of them, based on study guides being circulated and websites that are out there and everything else. So they showed up without preparing. They showed up thinking that they were going to see questions that were basically identical to what they saw in a practice exam online. And when it wasn't that, they failed at a very high rate. That was the first administration back last year. What's happened since then is the wake-up call has happened, and the pass rates have improved. So the pass rates, that's kind of the trend. It was a big surprise. It was a big surprise to a lot of people, even though everybody knew All the NACs knew that we were going to a new exam and a new exam proctoring company and all those other things, but I'm not certain that all that made it to the technicians or that they weren't prepared. So they dropped off. They've recovered. They're not quite where we would want them based on historical pass rates, which is probably one of the biggest impetuses why I talk at every single member meeting and I'm doing this webinar and everything, and is because obviously we want to get back to those historical pass rates that maintain the integrity of the certification program. So we put out this new information, and that's exactly our goal, is to get them back to the historic pass rates. So very long answer, but I hope that it was something that helps understand the whole 10,000 foot view of it. The pass rates were abysmal when the new exam first came out. They've improved substantially in some cases, but we still have some work to do, and that's why we're doing this and other stuff.
Hi, Dan. It's Kristen again. I have another question that is a good one, I think, from somebody who wants to know, some of their technicians have questions on the test that they've come across that table memorization is required. I'm thinking these are, any type of standard reference where there's a value that is asked for that's referred to in a standard, probably the ANSI NETA standards. We prefer our techs don't try to memorize tables, but always look up the answers so they are 100% correct. Will these types of questions stay on the test, or do you ever see them moving to being able to use books as references, similar to the PE exam?
Yeah, good question, and we've talked about this a fair amount. Moving to an open book test is an extremely game-changing situation. It would basically make us have to go through a whole exam design again and start this process all over, which we're not opposed to doing that. It probably won't happen for another 3 to 5 years, but I'm not certain that that's the way that we're going to end up. But to the real point of your question, the memorization of actual table numbers and those types of things, that is not something that the subject matter experts and the exam committee really prefer to do. It's not the type of question necessarily that at its surface really tests competency. So we try to shy away from them as much as possible. The only caveat I would give to that is, if you are, some of the most common things out there, like table 100.1, how do you test that somebody's actually been in the field for 2 years or 5 years or 10 years doing insulation testing, and they don't even know, they have to look up table 100.1. So it's a balancing act there a little bit. I completely understand what the question is about, and I can tell you that we avoid those as much as possible, but there are some where the subject matter experts come to consensus that, hey, if you've been in the field for 5 years doing this testing and we put this question on a level 3 exam, you should get it. We also, you can structure the question in a way, and more importantly, structure the answer and the distractors, the incorrect answers, in a way that you're not testing whether somebody knows that it's 1000.43 or 1000.52. You're testing the concept, like, should a DLRO reading on a 3000 amp breaker be 20 microohms, or should it be 250 ohms? Even though that's kind of a memorization process, you would think maybe on the surface that's a memorization type question. It's not. It's a conceptual question. So we're aware of that. We do try to avoid those. We definitely try to get them worded in a way that make them conceptual, not what is, this to 3 decimal places, because we agree that having to memorize tables isn't what a competency exam should be about.
Okay.
Anything else, Chris?
I I think that I've captured all of the questions that I saw come over the text message. Somebody did, oh, sorry.
I see from Marissa that says, how can I access the recorded program?
Yep.
That's going to be sent out by Kristen.
Yep. So, and that, yep, I was going to just mention that part of it. So the recording hopefully has recorded the screen as well as the audio. That's, I've got my fingers crossed on that. I tried it out before, but I'm hoping that all worked. And so the file will be uploaded and hosted on a Dropbox site, and a link will be sent out to all the NETA accredited representatives who may then forward it on to anyone they feel is appropriate. So that link will be sent out probably tomorrow would be my guess. I know that this is going to be a large file, so I just need to make sure that that all works and we can get it and that people can access it easily once they have the link. So if not tomorrow, then the next day, as we know that the exam period opens in April next Monday. So.
Okay, great. Well, I certainly appreciate your time. I hope that it was useful. I'm encouraged to see the turnout. We had 26 out of 26 possible attendees, and I think other people were trying to get in. So good idea, Kristen, to record it so that we can get it out and people can watch it and listen to my voice in the wee hours of the morning and at night, and I'm sure they'll appreciate that.
Yep, it's going to be good. Thanks, Dan. Thank you so much for taking your time, everyone. We appreciate it. And as always, if you have any follow-up questions, please go ahead and email NETA at netaworld.org. That's our general inbox, and those questions all get triaged really quickly and sent to the appropriate staff person. And so that's a really good way to go about asking your questions. You can also call us. Emails are great because we can read them and know that we're replying exactly as needed. And I'm also more than happy to get emails directly as well. It's kwix@netaworld.org if you want to email me directly. But I do encourage people to use the main NETA inbox for their starting out communications anyway. So thanks again. Thanks, Dan. And I'm sure this probably won't be the last one of these that we do. So we'll talk to you guys later.
Great. Thank you, guys.
Thanks. Bye.